Horrifying. So we're high up this hot dog. Drag dummy up. Dummy's 100. Full sand, you got job training.
You know another guy. See, I went to high school always here.
You're talking
So, content finance
really kind of easy.
that team.
Getting you into the office every day. It's a different name. He came in today, so everything's working for me. He came in today otherwise I'd be up on the central coast.
See us in front of the night and content to make it occur.
So I'm the only one.
You've been in the sun. And you're all shiny and brown. You're doing muck on the road, I think. You've been in the sunlight.
I like to see it and you everything. Find little answer. Care about.
There is.
Cancer.
You know, when we. He's on record.
Job it is. I said,
G'day. Welcome again to the Institute of Actuaries. Sorry. And we're always very happy to be hosting the City AI Data Science Meetup. This is the first time we're hosting this one at lunchtime. We're trying to test the model a bit to see whether we get different sorts of people coming to these events and those who can't make it in the evening. So thank you for coming. I've been asked to do a survey. Eugene's actually asked me this, but the question is like how many members of the Institute of Actuaries are here today, and if you can put your hand up so we can just count them.
Oh, okay.
So could someone count them? Keep your hand up. Okay. And for those people online, if you're a member of the Institute of Actuaries, could you just put in the chat that you're a member, just so we're just trying to get a bit of a survey whether we are attracting actuaries or not. Well, I noticed all the actuaries at the back of the room. So shyer than the data scientists. So that's, yeah, very interesting. Why does this collaboration exist? Basically, there's a lot of work being done between actuaries and data scientists. They're collaborating on a lot of things in a lot of different companies. Some of those things are enhancing service models and supporting digital transformations. And these sort of meetups are really about trying to explore different issues and hear from people, hear the different ideas. And as you might have seen from some of the previous meetups, is that we like to challenge our speakers and put them through the ringer and let that exchange of ideas. So that's always very interesting. Let's see, just give me a second while I'm not doing my stuff in order, so that's all right. Yeah, so I suppose this is a great to meet people and network. I've met lots of interesting people here and very interesting business models and crazy ideas that people are doing with data, and it's just amazing. There is another thing that the Institute of Actuaries is partnering with. The Institute's Data Science and AI Scholarship with the Chief Executive Women. So if you know any women in data science who are probably more senior, there's an opportunity for a scholarship, and this scholarship offers up to $25,000 for leadership courses at NCAD, Stanford, or SEED Business School. And if you're eligible or know someone who's eligible, please pass the details on. And you can find those details. So is there still a poster at the back of the room or not? Yep. There's a poster at the back of the room which has got a QR code, and you can also visit the Institute's website. So that's a really great opportunity if you know someone, if you've got a friend who you think this will be useful for them and also for their branding. So just help out a friend, I suppose. Anyway, I'll pass to Eugene and have a great session today. Thank you.
Thanks, Bill, for that typically kind introduction. I want to reiterate Bill's question because it occurred to me that we want to know not just how many actual card-carrying actuaries, but also people on the actuarial path, actual or aspiring actuaries, let's say. Hands up, please. So, about the same number. And similarly, anybody who's joined virtually, if you could let your actuarialness be known in the comments. Thank you.
So Eugene, are you asking whether the traditional data science, is that what you're asking?
Beg your pardon?
Traditional actuarial role or data science role, is that what you're asking? Or?
Well, no, just whether people are on the actuarial track. I think it ain't no secret that one of the reasons we're running the daytime event is because a number of people of an actuarial bent have indicated that they may be a little bit more comfortable in family and lifestyle commitments. So that's why we're trying a daytime event, and we'd like to know if it's serving the actuarial community. So thank you all, actuarial or otherwise, for coming to this very first daytime, hopefully not the last, AI plus Sydney AI plus data science event. We did change the name recently. And the reason we changed the name is because we're not just about data science anymore. AI is increasingly important. And of course, that brings us to today's speaker, who is quite a luminary in the field and is saying something rather important about the topic. He's been also kind enough to correct me about the pronunciation of his last name. So Alberto Chierici, or Dr. Alberto Chierici, is a scientist, tech entrepreneur, and the author of The Ethics of AI, Facts, Fictions, and Forecasts. Dr. Chierici has over a decade of experience in enterprise applications of machine learning and AI. He worked on the launch of Tesla Insurance and helped several entrepreneurs build and launch their products. As an accomplished speaker and thought leader, Dr. Chierici has presented at numerous conferences, sharing his insights and expertise with the broader technology community. His expertise in machine learning is matched by his passion for innovation and entrepreneurship. Throughout his career, he has shown a keen ability to identify emerging trends and technologies and turn them into successful products and businesses. And let's find out from Alberto, why do we, as we ought to, care so much about the ethics of AI?
Thank you, Eugene. Thank you. Thank you for having me here. It's a very warm welcome to the country. I actually moved to Australia 10 days ago or so. And yeah, thanks. So yeah, we covered already, who am I, my background. So thank you for that. Let's jump straight into the topic. This presentation doesn't want to go into depth into many of the topics I will touch upon, and it's divided in sort of three parts. First, I want to cover some definitions. It's always good to put down what AI is, what is not. And then I will share some experiences of use cases and the experiences from my professional path into applications that were good, other not so good. And finally, I will draw a number of principles that I believe are important when addressing ethical concerns. And at the end of the presentation, I will try to answer this question. Okay, so let's start. What is AI? If we look at the dictionary, the first word is artificial. Artificial shares etymology with artifact. So artifact means something human-made. And it sometimes implies inferiority. Like if you would give artificial flowers to a person, would not be, let's say, as happy as receiving the real thing. And when we speak about intelligence, it's interesting because scientifically there is no agreed upon definition of intelligence. There's nothing that can be easily quantified, that we can measure Yes, there are IQ tests, but even that it's highly debatable what kind of intelligence they measure. And if we look at the dictionary again, we see intelligence as the ability to learn, to understand, grasping truths. And if we think about software, and AI is software, is an engineering artifact, can we really say that this software is able to learn, understand, grasping truths? So that's a question that I leave there, and maybe we'll find some answers later. Now, historically, AI has been probably willingly defined poorly because it had, let's say, it has a varied it has origin from various fields. It doesn't come up as a field of science. It comes from you know, cultural stories, some even religious beliefs, linguistic, cybernetics, math, statistics, so that there are many fields that converge into the discipline of AI. The term was coined around the 50s in 1954, and one of the considered fathers of AI is Alan Turing. And often people misquote his paper, the famous paper from the 50s, Machine That Could Think, and there is a branch of believers of so-called AGI, so the attempt to build computers that can think. But it's interesting, if those people would have read Alan Turing's, they would realize that in his paper, he actually argues that machines cannot think. So I invite everyone to read the actual paper rather than just the title. Philosopher Luciano Floridi, who is head of the Yale Center for Ethics, Digital Ethics, and AI, he speaks about artificial agency. So he says that modern AI software is agency on tap. So we have now access to a lot more agency, so software that can achieve tasks, much more and many more different tasks that we thought could be possible from traditional software. And Floridi also stresses that artificial intelligence is really successful when software manages to decouple the agency from the intelligence. So the key issue that Floridi underlines is that machine learning software is able to accomplish tasks without the need to be as intelligent as a human person. And this brings me to an Australian father of AI, Toby Walsh, who speaks about AI as a fakery. His latest book is Faking It. And his whole point is that machine learning is a very, very clever way of getting computers to achieve certain tasks, faking intelligence. Like they behave and perform actions as if, or sounding like humans, but that doesn't tell anything whether the machine is as intelligent as a human person. And finally, I want to quote Mustafa Suleyman, one of the co-founders of DeepMind, who he was one of the very first to speak about AGI. DeepMind was founded in 2010 or 11 with a big, let's say, blue sky goal of developing AGI, artificial general intelligence. In his latest book, Mustafa Suleyman, who he published The Coming Wave last year, he replaces the word general with capable. So it's interesting that he's now kind of moving away from these science fiction terms and saying, look, let's just focus what capacity the machine develops and has. Now, what do I call AI? I came across this definition. I think it encompasses almost everything that AI software can do today. First of all, AI is a software. It's not magic. It's not building a humanized machine or a Frankenstein of the modern age. It is written by humans, and this is a very important point because if it is written by humans, it means that the liability is and shall always be human. Again, Professor Floridi underlines that there is no such a thing as the AI wants, the AI does. It's always a human in charge of wanting and doing. So it's software written by humans to accomplish human objectives and may have statistical error. Now, if we step back a bit and consider how all the AI is developed today, back in the 50s up to the 90s and early 2000s, there were many techniques to develop AI systems. Some of them, most of them, I would say, were deterministic software, whereas today mostly is based on machine learning. So if we speak as AI as some software developed or with some machine learning features, we should be really aware that this software has always statistical error. And that's very important in terms of discourse around ethics and fair use and so on. These, let's say, software programs or systems, they have a high degree of adaptivity, so they can adapt to new environments and unseen context. They have a certain degree of autonomy, so there isn't a human behind always pushing the button, and they act rationally. That's another definition, pretty important, that comes from the textbook that every, let's say, computer science AI 101 class proposes. There are 4 quadrants: software that can think and behave, and how, software that can behave or think rationally or humanly. And again, across all these spectrum, Russell and Norvik, professors at UC Berkeley, they argue that AI agents are softwares that act rationally. So they are agents, they perform actions, that's what's important. And it's, scientifically speaking, is very difficult if we say, oh, we want to measure to what extent they can think or to what extent they have humanity. So they settle for the word rationality because these agents, they can act following some rational laws, math and statistics. So we can actually measure what they do. We can actually do science with this kind of software. Now, one last digression on the definition of AI. The definition the ISO proposed was highly debated and iterated. But I'm quite happy that they settled down with a definition that makes sense. So when they speak about artificial intelligence, they speak about AI systems. So again, it's an AI is not just one thing. It's always like a bag of software and scripts that do different things. They are engineered systems. So again, quite similar to what I was saying earlier. It's an engineering artifact. It's not magic. That generate outputs such as content, forecasts, recommendations, or decisions for a given set of human-defined objectives. So they stressed human-defined objectives that in one of the first definitions wasn't there. And the other important aspect is I would stress the word decisions. So one of the novel things about AI and why it is very important to care about its ethics is that given that we have this new wave of agency on demand, we can ask software to do more and more things. We are offloading, we are delegating a lot of decisions to this software system. One more definition. So what is ethics? Actually, 2 more. So one definition, what is ethics? Ethics is generally understood to be the study of living well as a human being. And I would underline, so this is from the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy. The aim, the goal of human beings is to exemplify human excellence of character. And what is business ethics? Why it's important this? Because AI is success commercial. So we have a huge push and gold rush from companies to adopt AI. And AI ethics, for me, is very similar to business ethics and shall answer questions like what sorts of things can be sold, how they can be sold, in whose interest should firms be managed. We can replace, in whose interest should AI and these kind of softwares be managed, who should manage them, responsibilities, and so on. So you can relate with all of these questions when we speak about AI systems. Now, why ethics is important in AI? Again, I'll try to answer this question throughout the presentation, and I give an attempt, first attempt here. 2 reasons. So one is AI is different software. It's not as traditional software as we let's say are accustomed to with computer programs like Microsoft Excel or a simple calculator. AI is a completely new way to do software, to develop software, to ask computers to accomplish tasks. And finally, these points of delegating more and more tasks, decisions. I underline the word decisions to AI. So as we delegate more decisions and as we build software in a completely new, different way, ethics becomes important. Becomes important in 3 aspects: in how we develop this software, in how we ship it, how it is deployed. So the responsibility is not only from the developer side, is also from company adopting vendors and solutions, and how they're used. So even once they're deployed, what is the end user use of an AI system? And there is another word which is interesting in the nascent scientific literature about responsible AI or explainable AI. A lot of the pioneers in the field, I had the privilege to take one of the very first classes of responsible data science at New York University back in 2018. Professor Stoyanovich is one of the pioneers of responsible data science, and she always speaks about autonomous decision systems. Because the same ethical framework that applies to AI applies to, say, any decision, very important decision that we delegate to an algorithm, whether this algorithm is, say, powered by AI or not. But we're delegating a crucial decision that impacts people, lives, businesses, and society to a set of rules. Okay, now in the second part, I want to mention a couple of case studies. First one, we have a company that I think is a great example of automation, delegating tasks to automation, and with a wonderful and ethical outcome. Boxed is a company in the US, I think in Boston, they were facing a huge competition from some say Chinese similar competitors. And in 2017, they decided to replace with AI and robotics the need for 100 full-time employees who were adept at fulfilling orders. Now, what did they do? Did they fire all of them? No. The CEO had a more, let's say, visionary decision. They decided to retrain and promote most of these workers. And some moved to different roles like trainers, learning how these technologies operate. And others were moved to other, say, important roles where human connection is way different than employing machines like customer service. And as a result of that, some people had more fulfilling careers than just fulfilling orders. And others also enjoyed the uplifting pay. And it's important, this sentence from Chi Huang, the CEO of Boxed. I will be the first to admit that it is not the smartest thing we've ever done when it comes to the balance sheet, but it's what we do. It is absolutely necessary to drive every last penny out of it at the cost of human livelihoods. And to me, this is a good example of, let's say, ethical and moral decision-making compared to what we are reading in the headlines over the past couple of years. Big technology companies, they're doing massive layoffs, and most of the layoffs are justified for investment into AI. Bloomberg had this news, I think a year and a half ago, IBM was planning to replace 7,800 jobs with AI. And there was a huge PR backlash, and the CEO had to retract and let's say renegotiate the job cut. We heard a few weeks ago, or about a month ago, I think, Zuckerberg directly emailing top AI developers to poach talent to with engagements that resemble soccer player salaries to come and develop AI, and at the same time, Facebook cut, I think, 10% of the workforce in the past couple of years. Another interesting example is Grammarly. They raised 200 million last year, 13 billion valuation, and soon after they laid off 230 employees. So there is also this mismatch between what you do people versus investment and valuations that these companies are getting. And so these practices they raise questions like, well, what is this gold rush towards AI? Are we really looking forward a world where we replace every single human being, and what's left to do? Like who pays people to do what? So why we need more ethical choice in AI? Now, to answer this question, I want to make a sort of digression into an important concept. This is the concept of robotic envelope. These frameworks help me understand where AI software is successful. And the concept comes from robotics, but we will see it is equally applicable into digital technologies. What is the robotic envelope? The envelope is that 3D space environment where robots can operate. And usually, a lot of robotic arms today are powered by machine learning algorithms, especially vision. They have to recognize some objects and then make the right choice. But it's interesting to notice that these robots would not work if we would not design the whole 3D space around them in an appropriate way to make them work. For instance, if I went, when I was working at Tesla, I went to Berlin to visit the opening of Gigafactory Berlin. It was really amazing, like this huge place with loads and loads of robots. And especially one point is very interesting. The paint room is a state-of-the-art painting shop for vehicles. And it's all like governed by robots. And you know, if I would put one of those robots in my kitchen, for instance, it would make a mess. I would have a kitchen with fantastic colors that change with the lighting, but again, the robot would not work because my kitchen is not designed for the robot to work. And now, making the transition between the physical world to the digital, I want to make a step in between, which is autonomous driving software. Again, when I was working at Tesla, we were developing the product for Tesla Insurance, and we wanted to understand better the risk of miles driven on autopilot. And back then, I also purchased the Tesla, and I was trying a lot of the concepts that we were studying. And it was interesting because I had an accident, and it was a very, let's say, gray line situation because I was driving with autopilot engaged, and at some point there was a traffic light. I stopped, and then a green light came up, and I had a car on my back very close to me. And my car started when the green light lit, and at some point it broke suddenly, and the guy on my back went over me. And for today, driving conduct and laws, the fault was the person on my back because they weren't keeping the safe distance. However, there is a problem because the decision was taken by autopilot, was not taken by me, was not taken certainly by the car on my back. And I felt that the owner of the decision should have been Tesla, because it was the wrong decision. And when I analyzed the data to understand what happened, was that autopilot is very sensible to two things. So the lanes. So if the lanes are clearly marked on the road, the car knows where to go. But in the picture on the left, for instance, when you have some lanes that are not clearly marked on the road, and or maybe you have work in progress, you have like yellow lanes doing other directions, autopilot goes nuts. And the other situation, which is exactly what happened in my case, was that one wheel of the car in front of me was in my lane. And now autopilot is a software. The software have to make a decision which is 0 or 1. There's no concept of a gray area between black and white. So for me, a human person, I could clearly see there was enough space to just go straight. Whereas for the software, there was one wheel on my lane, and that was enough to say, okay, the whole vehicle is on the lane. And so it suddenly applied the brakes. And so this is a nuanced decision, but again, if that happened at high speed, would have been disastrous accident. Luckily for me, I was alone in the car, not with my kids, and the bump was small. But this is a clear situation where probably laws and liability should adapt. Tesla walks away with the driver is in control, the liability is on the driver because the driver is driving, and autopilot is just an assistive feature. But looking ahead at a world where probably highways, cars maybe will be all autonomously driven, that's clearly not enough of a good framework. And so this brings me, this is an example of robotic envelope that has say, two aspects. One is physical, like the road. The road is not designed yet for autonomous vehicles. And the second one is digital. So there is also digital software and perception that works with a representation of the world. And so digital software has to take decisions that are far less nuanced than physical world or reality we moved in. So I'm, for example, I'm a big believer that like technically autonomous driving is already problem solved on highways. Like highways, if every single car would have autonomous driving, they would drive with a very teeny percentage of faults. However, the driveways or the highways are robotic envelopes. So they're not yet designed so that these vehicles could operate without errors or with a very teeny percentage of errors. Now let's move to the physical world. Facebook launched in Sydney. This is a picture from Facebook campaign in Sydney years ago. And with Facebook, what happened? So we created a digital playground, an envelope, where all our social interactions, so befriending people, organizing events, keeping in touch with old friends, community engagement, building, and so on, is contained within a digital platform. So that's an example of digital enveloping. So the platform served as this digital space to connect, and as it evolved, without us probably even realizing, we allowed AI to analyze all this data that social interactions and the platform itself would capture about us, our interactions, our social lives. And so this is a very good example of an environment that is completely designed for an AI to have success, to act successfully. And Facebook became this space where AI could operate with a high degree of success because of the enormous amount of data that was shared, created, and for the high degree of freedom, like a lot of the features in the platform, like the wall putting on top things that we care about, or advertising according to how many likes we put to certain brands or figures. All of these is a digital world where AI can operate successfully because everything is designed for algorithms to work really well. And now the problem is that we've changed our environment, so we changed our world so that AI can operate successfully. But if we remember, Floridi's intuition about separating, decoupling intelligence from agency, it doesn't really matter about the intelligence behind. Algorithms, they always respond to a goal. For Facebook and most of the social media, goal is time spent on platforms. So optimizing time spent on platform is what these algorithms do. And over time, we saw how big of monsters these technologies created. In advertising, consumers are reduced to interfaces. So even the person itself is, becomes part of this digital envelope and becomes an interface between money and markets. So advertising money and markets. And as environment become more enveloped, ethical considerations, ethical problems grow. So the question, why this whole digression about enveloping? Because it's important to be able to choose what we really want to envelope, what we really are ready to transform into an environment where AI can have success. With the social media, with the Facebook, Instagram, and so on, we have seen that we are at risk of becoming just tools in a digital world where everything is driven by just profit motives and efficiency. And this begs the question: if everything becomes digitized, social interactions, social, let's say, the humanity of human beings, how do we maintain this humanity? How do we not transform humanity into an algorithm as well? And this is the segue into our last part, where I want to just pose some ethical principles that I came across throughout my career path so far. The first one is in his book, The Ethics of AI, Professor Floridi proposes some principles. Most of them are borrowed from biotech. There are many similarities between ethical issues in biotech and AI development. And the four principles that come from biotech are beneficence, non-maleficence, autonomy, and justice. And Professor Floridi adds explicability for AI systems. Explicability here must be understood as, I would say, accountability more than in AI. Usually we speak about explainable AI. This is not really explicability. So we need to be able to explain why we chose an algorithm to make a decision rather than why we how the algorithm makes the decision. Because I have my, let's say, reservations about explainable AI. I'm not sure it will ever be possible. It's a nascent, let's say, field of research, but as architectures like deep neural networks responsible for GPT and so on become more and more complex and huge, and explaining how they make decisions is harder and harder. But explicability here is something else. It's like an organization using a deep neural network like ChatGPT to make a decision or to issue a service or a product should be able to explain why they took that decision, why they chose ChatGPT over human customer service. Another set of principles that I say, this is for the everyday data science, people like me, you, and what we can do while we develop these systems as standards develop, as lawmakers issue rules and guidelines. In the meantime, there are, like, if we check the ISO 42001 definition, say sets of standards to develop AI systems, just following that contains a super robust and solid way to develop AI systems that are controlled, that are contained, that are robust, that can be governed pretty well. For the actuaries in the room, I started my career as an actuary. I remember doing the model documenting exam. I don't know in Australia if it's the same as the UK, but there was one exam where you have to be the model in R or Excel and write all the documentation, etc. And if I check these ISO standards, the process have many similarities. But the funny thing is that in my experience working for insurance companies, I've never seen that actually done. It's mostly, it's for satisfying the professional requirements, but then do organizations really implement that? I think it's important to do so. It's important to actually document properly models and establish guidelines and feedback loops to govern them. And again, if we check the ISO table of contents, there are many guidelines referred to foundational questions like what is the objective of the model, what is the objective of or the intended use of the model when it's out there deployed, and tracking feedback loops are really important to understand how the models are used, and we need to show users that we care. Most of the feedback forms from tech companies is like a form that people maybe fill, and then who knows what happens. Whereas following up and making sure that there is an action, there is an active listening and responding to those feedback forms is the way forward. Another set of ethical principles. So this is more what I talk about in my book. I wrote my book many years ago in the pre-ChatGPT world. I think most of the things I wrote still apply today. But I would say on top of these 3 points, I would add more and more of what you have listened so far. But there are 3 principles that I focus on. One is TST. So this is the question that philosopher Socrates asked to their students when engaging in anything. Whether it is deciding to develop a new product, doing an analysis, or building a predictive analytics tool, it's always a good practice really to ask, what is this? Like what is it that we are building? What is it that we are doing? What do we want to achieve? Second point is that data is people. Never forget that behind data there is always a reality. And most of these realities really are people, because where AI is used today pervasively and successfully as well, is grabbing people information. So, and here comes all considerations about privacy and understanding that harvesting data is really taking off something that was humanly generated first. There is a lot of debate today around copyright issues, or artists are getting paid for their work be used for training AI models and so on. So these sets of problems, I think they fall under this point of awareness that when we speak about data, we are really talking about people. And finally, feedback loops. I already mentioned what that means earlier. And another set of principles that I think it's important is what it means to be human. And usually I ask this question because coming back to the title of the presentation, why do we care about the ethics of AI? There is a lot of, let's say, debate and talking, comparing and humanizing AI or this kind of machine learning softwares. And what worries me about that debate is that we are probably losing what it means really to be human. And if the human person is a machine, there's nothing that stops us to treat the human person as a machine. So in my book, for example, I interviewed the moral philosopher Jonathan Haidt, and he speaks a great deal of defining things before acting or before making normative statements in ethics and moral judgment. And it's really important to define who is the human person. If we are developing products that more and more claim to take off tasks from the human person, or to have output that influence the human person. And there are three characteristics that I borrow. I'm a Catholic, so I grew up with a certain anthropology. And what I learned is that there are three big parts of the human person that should always be safeguarded. One is freedom. The human person is free. And again, that is not like, if I see a lot of the uses of AI, especially in social media, how they've been deployed to condition decisions or to sway elections and so on. There is really a concept of the human person behind that. Person are better if controlled rather than free. And the second one is relationality. Human beings are relational. Most of the tech is built upon an image of a human person who is individualistic and doesn't need anybody else. So if I think about Apple Vision Pro, that's sort of but it's nice. Like, for example, in my PhD research, I did a lot of research about human computing interaction, and this comes up a lot. Like when we try to develop technologies that push too much people towards an individualistic view of the world, like you can do everything by yourself without need of anybody else. You have a lot of indicators and KPIs that are measured in human-computer interaction, falling off, and actually demonstrating that people prefer human relationships over individuality. And we've seen this with COVID as well, and the post-pandemic. And finally, transcendence. So transcendence is not necessarily, let's say, a spiritual or religious concept. It's mostly about this drive that every human person has to break limits, to achieve goals and objectives that are behind a certain limit. If we think about like career development, a lot about career development is always okay. What is my limit of knowledge so far, or my limit of what I can do today, and what I can do better tomorrow, or in the next role, or taking over a new responsibility. Another one is if we think about professional athletes, like nobody like them resembled this push for transcending their limits. They're always chasing a better target, a better performance. And understanding what is the human person and what we mean by anthropology of the human person as a consequence. So if we know who the human person is, we can treat the human person as a human person. And this brings us to responsibility. So responsibility is a big principle to have in mind when developing technology ethically. And this also brings me to a little digression that I just want to make to close, which is regarding what is the first responsibility that we have in front of AI. And that's also part of the overall answer to the presentation title, why do we care about the ethics of AI? Traditional software, most of you, I guess, have seen this diagram that compares traditional software with AI or machine learning. In traditional software, we have a script, which is a classical program that takes in some rules and some data and gives some answer. And we have heard from the notorious word from Anderson Horowitz, software is eating the world. Now, AI, machine learning in reality, is eating software now. And what is machine learning? Machine learning flips the concept. So it takes in answers and data and figures out what are the rules to get answers from that data, from new data or new context. And this means that AI machine learning is really different. Like it's not traditional software. And the very first responsibility that we have for traditional software, for AI software, is to secure it. Because most of the AI software has been developed as research repository startups. Most of these teams, they have little to no understanding of cybersecurity or security in general. And this kind of software can be used very easily in a malicious way. And there is a lot of emphasis on safe AI, and some people consider security as a subset of safe AI. And with safety, we mean things like reducing bias, reducing hallucination, making system more robust, and so on. They're all important aspects. Don't get me wrong, but there is one step back, which I think is more important and more hidden. Like not many organizations are fully aware of the security problems in AI. And these models can be hacked. They can be used to steal information from companies, to steal data, to create even. There are a lot of headlines about new diffusion models that create voice of the customer and so on. So malicious actor can use AI in a way to break into systems and organizations even more and more as organizations adopt these models. So it's really important to understand that the paradigm shifts between classical software and AI software demands first security, and from security, a lot of other responsible uses of this technology. I end here. I hope you enjoyed this chat, and I want to have more conversation now. You have 2 QR codes here. Connect with me on LinkedIn, and I also write Honest AI, which is a Substack publication. It's a sort of follow-up for my book. A lot of material that I wanted but couldn't cover in my book, I write it there. Thank you.
You can use it's recorded.
We have some questions.
Also, if people on the link, if they want to ask a question, just put something in the chat. I've got an iPad here which will pick up that message and we'll share it or question.
Yes, very interesting topic. AI right now is very mechanical and it makes mistakes. Instead of human beings, there's no difference I can see right now. And because it's written by humans, humans can also make the AI more human with feelings, love, you name it. It can also have passion, but it depends on the person writing the AI. So what's your comment about that?
Yeah, it's an interesting point. I think on this one, I would. I agree with Professor Toby Walsh of UNSW University. He speaks a lot about AI being fakery in a sort of ironic or sarcastic way. I think it's important. It's true. I agree with what you say. AI can be developed and made much more human, compassionate, and so on. But it's important not to fool users into or making them believe that it's a human. I think it's important, yes, to module language to be more empathic and so on. But it's always crucial to disclose and be aware that that's software. Like it's not a person, and asking users to have a relationship with software that is like a person, I think it opens up a can of worms.
I'm a Star Trek fan. When I see all those, I'm a Star Trek fan, and with all those humanoids acting and look like human, I think that'll happen one day. You've got those robots in Japan now. I love robots, and they're very human. They look like human skin, and they, that's the best sex idols. But we're getting that way. We're going to have married to a robot one day, I think.
Thank you, Alberto, for the presentation. That was very, very interesting. Just a question, kind of out of interest, keen to hear your thoughts. You spoke about, humans being relational, and sometimes, AI or what have you will push us to be more individualistic. Just keen to hear your thoughts. What do you think of social media? Is that helping us to be more relational or more individualistic?
Yeah, great question. Thank you. I think the birth of social media was aimed at making us more relational. And I remember the early days of Facebook. I was really happy that I could follow up or catch up with people that I lost along my life path. And I think still to this day, I thank technology for keeping a lot of relationships live that would probably die out if there wasn't that technology. The problem is that when the business model became all about monetizing advertising and attention, a huge distortion entered into social media platform and created I would say, the overall net effect, I think, is negative. The overall net effect is to make people more individualistic, and that's highly documented from studies on teenager use of Instagram and depression rates and suicidal issues. That's really gone out of control. So I think the net effect is negative, although the birth was on another direction.
Which is interesting, right? Because you could build something with the intention, make it something, but then it could evolve into something else. So
yeah,
it's interesting.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Oh. Am I?
Okay. I'll go first. I want to talk about or ask about externalities and permission. It's like we've all been, the whole world is in this vast social experiment that nobody's given their permission for, and for which the benefits are going to a handful of extremely wealthy people who own these companies. They don't seem to pay for any externalities such as social division and the vast use of energy that's projected for AI usage, etc. What's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, that's I do share the frustration and the worry that that's what is happening. And now there are, I think what's interesting compared to the age of social media is that social media gave us such a bad example that at least as a tentative or overall as a society, we don't want to repeat that. And that's quite clear for the number of, on one hand, politicians involved into regulating these technologies earlier than it happened with social media. With social media, to this day, we still don't have regulations. Whereas with AI, we are already thinking about that. And on the other side, there are a number of NGOs and organizations, independent organizations in the US, at least, that are lobbying and pushing a lot for the redefinition of liability. For instance, I recommend looking at the material from I think, I can't remember the center, but the person is Tristan Harris, he's a former Google employee who, is an entrepreneur, built some companies, then was a product manager at Google. And he's famous because he created the Netflix documentary, The Social Dilemma. And he founded the center, I think it's Center for Human Technology, but I may misremember the name. And that website has a lot of information on what's going on in terms of NGO for pushing for accountability and changes in direction from big tech. And one of the battles that is fighting these days is liability. And why is that? Because most tech companies, they walked away from social media problems from this famous law that I can't remember exactly. I think law was, yeah, I can't remember exactly when it was debated, but American law basically offloaded the responsibility of tech companies of the content created on the platform. So the platform walks away saying every content that is written on Facebook is not my liability; it's liability of the user, and that that is what allowed these companies to walk away from all the problems they created. So there is this shift now. There are many organizations lobbying and pushing for ownership of liability from the company who creates the platform, who creates the software. We will see whether that happens or not. In some countries, it is happening. An example, when I was in New York, 2018-19, there was New York State issued a new, it was a state law regarding autonomous decision systems for recruiting. So every company issuing recruiting software, they had to disclose to the applicant they were using autonomous decisions, and they had to disclose the rationale for making decisions. Otherwise, they could not use the software. And there was a positive shift because many organizations just walked away from using this software in New York State. And that's interesting because let's say it's a movement from society that gives me more hope than the age of social media. But I still share some of the worry that we really do that.
In relation to hallucinations, is that going to be effectively part of the system all the time? Is there always going to be somebody in your organization that runs around and sets a garbage bin alight every now and again, and all hell breaks loose? Will that be solved, or will that always be a danger?
Yeah, good question. Well, as a scientist, I can't exclude the possibility, so I can't say it technically cannot be solved. So maybe a solution will appear. But one thing is clear, like as far as the output is created by a machine learning technique, which is the case now, there is always going to be statistical error. And the output, actually, I like that talk from CTO of a Dutch company on LinkedIn. He used to say that by definition, large language models always hallucinate. Like they always generate stochastic output. Most of the time, it's correct because the data has been trained on is, let's say, large enough on that topic, on that prompt or question that is asked to the system. But the very nature of the output is statistical, so it always hallucinates, and it will get it wrong for those edge scenarios where there isn't enough training data. So that brings me to another important point when deciding if an organization has to decide whether to deploy an LLM or not. They should do like a risk reward study to understand, compare, let's say, customer center, like compare to the mistakes that human customer centers make over a large language models. What is the rate of error? Can the large language model achieve a better rate of error? Can I be happy with that mistake? Yes or no? But LLM will always have hallucinations. On some topics, they over-engineer some, they put a band-aid or they try to engineer solutions to that, but they're not really foundational solutions. They're just control systems.
We'll have to build that liability.
Sorry, could people use a microphone? Because we've got people online.
So they'd have to build that liability level into the system. And
yeah, exactly.
That's it. The cost of doing business, basically.
Yes.
Okay, Alberto, thank you very much for your presentation. It was lovely. So my question is about the relationship between AI ethics, as you're describing here, and the concept of AI safety that has been merging very, very strongly over the past few years as the stakes have been, going up with very large models, very powerful models. Many high-profile experts being concerned about the future safety, not of self-driving cars, not of particular application in medicine and healthcare, but even safety of public safety, humanity, can use this to engineer pandemic-grade pathogens, can use this to automate the process of launching devastating infrastructure threatening cyber attacks. And these things actually start to learn how to deceive people so that you can detect whether they are actually pursuing the goals that you gave them or hidden goals. So how do you sort of think about this sort of AI safety kind of blob of concerns in relationship with the more mundane, traditional, and even today, daily concerns related to what you were describing earlier?
Yeah, it's a large topic. If I can, let's say, summarize the way I see it or my thinking is that, on one hand, so one reason why I write and advocate a lot about ethics, I think on one hand there is a large part that is education. Let's say educating the public, companies, policymakers about what these technologies really are, what they can do, what they cannot do, is a very first step to know what we are using and what we are deploying. I think that's first, like step one is really about education, and also education is about culture. So I think ethics, education, and culture have many commonalities. It's very difficult to speak about ethics in a culture where there are no basic human rights, for instance. Whether it's it's an easier topic to bring about in a democratic country with a shared set of human values. So there is for sure an educational and cultural aspect to push forward, even in formation of engineers. Like when I was at NYU, for example, there was a big push to add, let's say, elective courses for engineering major or minors that would cover philosophy, humanities, and give a more rounded education to an individual, so that we no longer have engineers that just develop software and tools for the pure pursuit of efficiency, forgetting everything else of the human person and the society. On the other side, I think part of what we call safety, I have a strong belief that there are already enough forces to regulate, to control the ISO standards that give a very good framework. The difficulty, I think, is enforcing the framework. I think that's the difficulty, and it's not clear yet how to enforce a certain framework. For instance, I was collaborating with people in the Italian government who are they want to make a classification of level of autonomy for LLM use in editorial contexts. For example, a newspaper, journalist publishing an article, can we measure to what extent they used autonomous writing? So they can disclose this article has been written level 1, so just polishing using an AI, or level 5, it's completely written by AI. Again, it's a very good framework, similar to autonomous driving. You have different levels of autonomous driving definitions from engineering standards, but very hard to implement or to enforce. Like how can you enforce a system like that? And I think this is where the, say, culture and education meet enforcement, is that if we educate individuals properly, we will, we don't need to enforce so much. We would expect individuals to behave better, which is sort of when we were giving definitions, what is ethics? Ethics in which the aim of human beings is to exemplify human excellence of character. So if we take care of educating towards human excellence of character, I think it's going to be just better overall for the society. That's a short answer, but there are many other things to explore probably.
Thanks.
Yep, to see. Thank you, Alberto. It was a really good presentation. I have a question around, so clearly there are some cases, you've used the box case where it worked, right? and you use your example around your experience with the Tesla car in autonomous driving, where there are people within the organization that thinks about these stuff and it will work. So my questions are the following. Do you have any practical suggestions or ideas where it worked well within a business to push the conversations towards ethics and AI, especially in this environment where a lot of companies have expense pressure, there's high focus and bottom line, and things get pushed behind? What would your suggestions around this area?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there are many examples in which that happens. Some of them I cover in my book. And one example that just pops in my mind is Amazon. There are two good examples, one in Amazon, one in IBM. So IBM, at some point, they decided to discard a project on facial recognition just because it was too invasive of privacy. Although there was a big business case with clear ROI to use that system, they just discarded it. So I think that there is a way, again, back to education and culture. There is a way to say, look, ROI, profit motives are not the only thing. We are moral beings. We are relational. That we are responsible. There is not just us. There is the rest of the world around in which we act and we work and socialize and so on. So a wider awareness of stakeholders is what brings these kind of decisions. The other one was Amazon. They discarded the autonomous recruiting system, I think around 2018 or 17. And because the finding is that the system was highly biased towards males with the name of Jared, or who were like proficient at lacrosse. It was very weird, but it picked up a clear bias of current employees of Amazon back then that shared, some probably demographics that were very similar. So the system just categorized as high performance only a certain demographic. And in that case, there was a clear bias, even though, on the test set, the system was doing great and would have streamlined really well Amazon recruiting. They decided it was the right thing to turn off.
We have one more question before we break for after talk networking. Sorry for you, unfortunately. Just Valentina's our last question, but hopefully Alberto will stay till the end of the event and you'll be able to ask him more questions during networking, or are you open to questions by email and social media?
Yeah, absolutely. Connect with me and
so
super open.
Plenty of opportunities to ask if you have more questions. Over to you, Valentina.
Thank you for the absolutely fascinating presentation. It was a pleasure. And my question is, I really loved that example with the Tesla car. And actually, at the conclusion of that example, you told that it was a question of liability and laws. In my opinion, what actually is highlighted by this situation is that the car and the environment, they acted in a way that it becomes clear that not all scenarios were played out prior the Tesla being released, right? Or like the situation being able to appear. So, which means that it's kind of like raises that question, do you think, or perhaps, some information that there is an arising need on a global scale for some authority to appear so that it can monitor things that can impact human lives? Like with your example, right? It was like a happy end because you did not lose your life, thankfully, nothing bad has happened, but it actually has highlighted that situation can get into a dramatic way, right? And that happens as if we're kind of like utilizing AI, and we're trying to do that in ethical way, but it feels like it's raw situation. So do you think that there is an arising need for some on a global scale so that I don't know, governments of countries should unite their forces and create like some kind of institute that would be able not only to control ethical utilization of such kind of products, but also to make sure that those products are not released prior to all multi-scenarios being tested so that people people's like humanity is not like in danger, you know, people's lives are not in danger. Maybe some already are arising. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, yeah, great question. And I think it's, yes, you highlighted one more aspect of the Tesla example, which is very relevant. Yes, I believe so. So I believe there is the need of international agreed standards. I'm not sure how enforceable or deployable is a supervisory body that acts globally. Probably that's very hard to put in practice. But there are certainly forces pushing for it. I am aware of negotiation between China and France on international standards on AI. I'm also aware of a summit in, I think it's South Africa or India, like maybe India, happening this week or the next, where there are some international organizations taking care of agreeing international principles and standards. I believe it's at least in the short term, is very doable to have an international body to agree on standards. But then it's up to probably local administration to enforce them, like to make sure there are supervisory bodies, independent supervisory bodies who actually evaluate systems before they're released. In the European Union, for example, that's the case. Like there is already governments in all the 27 member states are already organizing digital agencies or government or non-government independent bodies that can certify systems before they are deployed. So there is a movement towards that direction for sure, and I think it's important.
Right. Can you please all join me in thanking Alberto for a very... Now, before we break for the after-event networking, as is customary, we now open the floor to announcements, particularly announcements regarding positions in the data science and AI space. Chris, being the one recruiter I can identify, do you have anything to share with us?
Yeah, sure. Hi everyone, I work at SKL. We recruit primarily across the technology and actuarial space. So many of our clients are insurers, large and small. We do have a couple of contract roles as well. Still finding out more.
Any other announcements, positions or otherwise? And if not, thank you all very much for coming, and hang around for the networking.